Okay, hopefully you guys are able to see my screen. Okay, awesome. That's my research paper. Yeah, let's get started. Okay, I told you, right? After all the hard work, we will be successful. Yeah, yes. So this is my second research paper for the second day of Contessa 2023 research conference. And this second topic is on harnessing web accessibility tools for WCAG 2.1 migration of a design system. Yeah, my name's Hardik Shah. I go by Harry. I have expertise in UI engineering, web accessibility, and building design system. And I'm a researcher, engineer, and consultant. And my purpose is to basically advocate for building semantic and accessible user interfaces for the web. I'm also a student from Department of IT, Rochester of Institute of Technology, based out of New York, USA. Um, speaking about the main goal of this paper, it's actually a study paper and where we will be addressing the critical challenges of upgrading a design system to conform to WCAG 2.1 guidelines. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and the special focus is on the integration of various web accessibility tools within the migration workflow. Now, expanding on the abstract, in the increasingly dynamic environment for the web interfaces, design systems allow for uniformity, expandability, and usability. We will dive into what design systems are, but upgrading these design systems being the core component of a user interface architecture, upgrading these design systems towards WCAG 2.1 exemplifies efforts for inclusivity while also being legally compliant and offering enhanced experience to people with various disabilities and impairments. The migration process from to WCAG 2.1 entails an in-depth assessment of the existing accessibility benchmarks um, against what you are deficient towards WCAG 2.1 in your application. And while doing that, there will be usage of several tools like screen readers, color contrast checkers, and automated accessibility testing frameworks, which will serve as a measure and beacon quantifying current accessibility levels and guiding our enhancement process. These web accessibility tools will assist in validating the semantic structure, ensuring keyboard navigability, verifying visual designs against the color contrast ratios and reflow requirements. Um, this also the paper will also highlight the nuances of the migration process from WCAG 2.0 to 2.1 and underscoring the importance of these tools in upholding the ethos of digital accessibility. Towards the end, after this paper covers how these accessibility tools cover the migration path, it will provide a comprehensive approach to assessing compliance, finding gaps, and maintaining these standards via CI/CD automation. CI/CD standing for continuous improvement and continuous deployment. So let's dive into understanding what a design system is. At a high level, when you're looking at any kind of a website or a web, technically called as a web application in the realm of web development, say for example, you're looking at Amazon.com or Google.com, what you see on the page when it's loading in the browser, actually, you see elements of basically a user interface. Now, if you're looking at a search box, that's one element. That's actually a text field where you can basically type in your text, and that'll have an adjoining button along with it for searching. There will be other elements like headers, actually, and headers come in different basically levels: header 1, header 2, header 3. Then you have content, you have navigation. These are all elements of an interface. What you see across, say, these websites is across Amazon.com or eBay, that they are consistent, as you navigate through the different experience of this web pages, and then the website, you'll see consistency. And so this is how I summarize a design system. A design system at a high level consists of building blocks These building blocks basically, when organized together, become patterns. Now these building blocks are not built just to basically be a block. They're based on certain set of rules called a design principles, underlying design principles, accessibility principles, and they have a certain guidelines actually, which are guiding them. There are obviously certain do's and don'ts and certain a lot many other guidelines. So these building blocks could be components as for the example that I said, a search box, a button, a submit button, then you have headers, level 1, level 2. You have modal. Actually, when you click on something, a pop-up shows up. You different kind of images, you may have a slider. These are all components, which I call them as building blocks. Now when these components are arranged together, they basically become high level components. When multiple components are again bundled together, they become modules. This is more a terminology in ES6 JavaScript, where you can basically bundle multiple entities together, and you can export them as modules. And when you bundle multiple modules, they become templates. And these templates can be consumed in an application. So here is another example to understand that just from a perspective of biology, an atom is the smallest part of basically an organism. And when multiple atoms combine, they become molecules, and molecules, when they combine together, become organisms. Which is how you can also understand design systems, how components become these high level components, and they become templates which can be consumed by our web application. So now that we understood design systems, this poster will make us understand WCAG before we dive in deeper into the research and understanding the web accessibility tools. So WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are guidelines which were the first guidelines which came out was WCAG version 2.0. It was made by this consortium called as W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. It's also the same consortium which makes these standards for HTML, CSS. And so they came out with WCAG 2.0 guidelines, and they are based on 4 principles. They are called as 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And every principle are geared towards a certain audience, disabled audience with certain type of impairments. Maybe they are color blind, or they have partially blind, they can't hear it, and a lot of other basically impairments. So these principles map to a certain set of success criterias. And for WCAG 2.0, there were 61 in total, and there is a varied level of conformance, because we cannot define a certain guideline for all applications. So there are different fidelity of conformance, the A, AA, and AAA. And depending on the conformance that you go for, AA being the most popular, there are certain success criteria that have been defined. And WCAG 2.1, which basically superseded 2.0, came out in 2018. What we have in WCAG 2.0 was there were 13 success criteria for AA compliance. Obviously, the total is 61, but there were 13 actually which were on the AA. WCAG 2.1 AA builds on the foundation of WCAG 2.1 AA, and it added 7 new success criteria. So if you have a web application and you do not have accessibility supported, now you can understand the math. Obviously, you have to first support it for WCAG 2.0, and then you add support for WCAG 2.1, which is what this poster basically summarizes. So now that we have a foundation for that, let's move on to the understanding design systems and understanding different challenges further. So as we basically covered previously, design systems serve as the backbone of user interface development. The typical the advisor as a consultant, what I also, apart from a student consultant, what I also advocate is, if you want to build a web application which is going to scale, if you're a startup, or if you want to build it for your university or anything, you want to build your design system first, or you want to basically consume an existing design system and build your web application on top of that, because your design system is going to be the backbone of your web user interface. It offers a unified set of components, patterns, and standards, ensuring consistent user experiences across platforms. Design systems also encapsulate design tokens. These design tokens are like variables which are in the form of key value pairs. So a lot of different colors that you see on, so the color for the text, the color for your headers, your color for, the labels for your fields, they basically can be mapped to these tokens, like what's the color for the text, what's the background color. So they encapsulate design tokens, icon, UI components, best practices, and several things together, which become an essential tool in the modern software engineering toolkit. Now, this slide speaks to the migration procedure. There are four steps to it, or you can say four layers to it, however you see it. The first step includes, if you have a web application, you want to do a thorough evaluation of your existing design system for that web application to check for WCAG 2.0 standards. Are they compliant for WCAG 2.0 standards? The AA guideline. What kind of criteria is it already satisfying? What kind of criteria it's not satisfying? What are the gaps actually? And so you basically do the meticulous understanding and implementation of WCAG 2.1 enhanced criteria. The second step is um, remediation of those defects. In the step one, when you figure that, hey, there are deficiencies with WCAG 2.1, the second step is to remediate them, have a plan for that, and then evaluate that. And the third step is WCAG 2.1, diving into 2.1, understanding those criteria and adding 2.1 support. Now that your application is 2.0 compliant, you add 2.1 compliance. And the last step is adding automation in your build and CI to ensure that these checks for 2.0 and 2.1 every time that your application goes to production, that happens. So its accessibility is not should not be an afterthought. It should be basically the best practices to add support when you're building the application. But for a lot of legacy applications, if you don't have support, this migration procedure will be a lot of help. And the research focuses on the role of web accessibility tools, which we will cover shortly. So for evaluating the existing WCAG 2.0 support, first thing, there are several things that you need to check. The first thing you can check for is the keyboard navigation feedback. So in your web user interface for your website or your web application, as you tab through, if you hit the tab key on your keyboard and as you're tabbing through the user interface through various fields, you want to check actually that your screen reader, whether it is JAWS or whether it is the Apple's own voiceover. Android also has its own has its own screen reader in its Android operating system, whether you're using the Chromebook or whether you're using your Android phone. So when doing that, you want to check, especially on, say, a desktop, if you're using a keyboard just tabbing through the interface, the screen reader should be able to vocalize the content and add the name of the element that receives focus. You want to check for that support. The second thing is the visual indicators. So whatever elements basically has the focus, is it able to read out its information? The primary information being the label, what kind of field this is, secondary information being any kind of tooltips are there, and so on and so forth. And the third one is the role and the state announcements. So for example, a drop-down list or combo box is different from a text field. So when the focus comes to the drop down, the screen reader should read out that it's basically a list of elements. And as you hit the down arrow keys, you should be able to go through multiple items in your list. So you should be able to speak out the role and state announcements. The fourth one being the detection of focus traps. This is basically a special scenario where, let's say a modal, you click on you click on login, say on twitter.com, a modal used to show up for you to basically log in with your username and password. So when you hit the escape key, the modal should close. But if you hit the escape key and it doesn't close, that's a focus trap because you're unable to basically navigate back to the main user interface, so you're just trapped. So also it's important that you detect that case. The other one is skip links. Skip links allow you to navigate from the top of the web page to the main area. So if there is a skip link, you should be able to skip the content, get to the main content. And then there are live regions. There are cases where basically for chat-based applications, where, for example, for an impaired users, who's color blind and is not, the interface is not visible, he's relying on a screen reader. So if there is a message that he receives in the chat window, that area should be marked as live, meaning that the screen reader should dynamically read the status, the chat message, if it's received. The user doesn't have to basically navigate to that particular interface to read the message. It should be dynamic, it should be a live region. So these are certain. Then we have error and alert announcements. If there is an error on the page, whether you're on an operating system or on a web page, this context is definitely for this research is a design system and the web application, but the error should be read aloud. So these are the existing support. These are the features. The first step is evaluating them. What are the deficiencies? And once you have the deficiencies, we can make use of web accessibility tools for ensuring, for the detection of that. Those are the features, that you should be detecting, but these are the tools that, they allow you to do it. So some of these tools are Google Chrome Lighthouse and Xdev tools. The Google Chrome Lighthouse is built into the dev tools into Chrome. You don't need any new plugin or new software to be installed. In your Google Chrome, if you just basically hit, I think it's Command F12, or definitely on Windows, it is just F12. If you hit F12, the DevTools is going to show up and it's going to have one of the tabs called as Lighthouse. That has an internal inbuilt feature to do an evaluation of your interface against accessibility principles, and then it's going to show you a report. X DevTools is basically a Chrome plugin that you can install, which will also do the same thing. It will run your web page through an assessment and give you the report against different categories. Accessibility Insights, it offers a several amount of utilities to test and assess and improve the accessibility of web application. And then there is Wave. What Wave allows is, sorry, it should be WebAIM. What WebAIM allows is, it basically allows you to check for the color contrast. For a lot of users, they are basically partially or color blind. They can only see these colors if they are of a certain color contrast ratio. WCAG 2.1 clearly suggests having a color contrast ratio of 4.5:1. So for a particular text in front of a background, it should be the color contrast for the foreground to background should be 4.5:1. There are this is basically some more features from WebAIM's color contrast checker. It basically supports testing for different text sizes, and whether the color contrast meets it for that particular text sizes. Then also it can give you color suggestions. If your color contrast ratio doesn't match, then it can give you that. There is also color blindness simulator that WebAIM offers actually. So let's basically, I'm going to break out of this and I'm going to give you a very quick demo of how these tools look like. I'm just going to be able to show you some snapshot quickly. This is a snapshot of the voiceover. This is an inbuilt feature of Mac OS X. You don't need to install anything. You just enable the voiceover. This is a screen reader and it starts as, so this basically what this shows is it's on apple.com. And it's able to read the text as you're hitting tab key. It basically speaks out the web page to you. Also shows you captions beneath that. Now this is hopefully this is visible. So this is a snapshot of the Lighthouse tool. As I said, if you open the dev tools in Google Chrome, there is a tab called as Lighthouse. Using that tool, you can strictly do just an accessibility check. And you can target different devices, whether it's a mobile or a device mode, and it's going to do an assessment of the web page, and it's going to give you a certain score. How much does it meet the accessibility criteria, and then it's going to give you basically under different categories for different fields and different success criteria, so what is deficient, and along with suggestions to fix them. This is a mock-up of the real mock-up of an Accessibility Insights tool. As you can see, there are different utilities supported under Accessibility Insights. Some of the utilities are FastPass, Quick Assess, You can do a quick assessment, or you can do an in-depth dive-in assessment of your web application, and then based on that, it gives these a report of what's failing, uh, and with suggestion on how to fix it. And also, it's actually mapped to the interfaces. So if you click on them, it's going to show you that. The last one being the color contrast checker. It shows you the color contrast if it meets the criteria, depending on the level of compliance. AA requires 4.5 to 1 for WCAG 2.1. Very quickly, I will wrap this in 2 minutes. So remediation of defects, there is a certain way, there's a project management you will have to apply. You will have to prioritize those defects. You will have to refactor your components in your design systems, like your text wheel, your radio buttons, all of them, to basically add deficiencies, to fix those deficiencies of WCAG 2.0. You may have to collaborate internally between developers, designers, and accessibility SME, subject matter experts. Obviously, documentation is important to ensure what has been fixed for project management, what are the estimates, and then diving into WCAG 2.1, there are several success criteria, but the top four criteria is color contrast ratio, which I kept saying it's 4.5 to 1. The reflow is the responsive design, ensuring WCAG 2.1 requires that for your website, whether it's open in your mobile or whether it's open in your desktop, it should adapt the interface. And if you're holding your phone actually in, say, in a portrait mode, or if you change it to a landscape mode, the user interface should adapt. Then the third criteria being 400% zoom. Like I said, these guidelines are geared towards impaired users. So if there are certain users who are partially blind, WCAG strictly suggests that your basically interface should adapt when you're zooming up to 400% zoom. So if you're going zoom up to 400%, your interface should adapt, and you shouldn't see a scroll bar. And the last ratio is the high contrast mode. This high contrast mode is a feature supported only in Windows by default. But the idea is if you're basically using any Braille devices or devices with support high contrast mode, your component should still be compatible. The designs for it. Um, and the last step is, after you are done going through the entire workflow of adding the support for WCAG 2.1, where these web accessibility tools play a very pivotal role, it's really important that you use one of those accessibility automation frameworks like Lighthouse CI or Core for adding basically automation checks in your build and CI automation during build and deployment. This will ensure that any kind of accessibility issues are caught right then and there, and your build doesn't go through, ensuring that there are no accessibility defects leaking to production. And so there are several ways you can do it. You can use Eggs for unit testing, ensuring that you're using X for writing your unit test. Then you can use Lighthouse CI, which will be a library that you can add in your build workflow. And these are just some of the steps. So to conclude, the migration of a design system to WCAG 2.1 is a complex yet very essential endeavor that underscores an organization's commitment to inclusivity. Uh, these research presented demonstrate that the role of web accessibility tools is invaluable in this process, offering automated and systematic approaches to evaluate and improve compliance. Um, these findings and my research focus also suggest that these tools not only facilitate the identification and remediation of accessibility issues, but they also serve as a catalyst for embedding accessibility into the fabric of the development process. Any questions? That's a great question. Very amazing question, actually. And that's which is why, yeah, the answer right now is, we are evolving, these requirements. Like I said, WCAG 2.0, it's a long answer, but it's a great question. WCAG 2.0 came in 2008. WCAG 2.1, and these guidelines were basically, as they were getting built, these tools, automation tools, were also getting built actually to support these guidelines. So WCAG 2.0 came in 2008, 2.1 came in 2018. And so as the software engineering, and as there were guidelines, and everybody had to basically adhere to these guidelines, these tools evolved. These bulk of the tools so far have evolved only to detecting things that what is deficient and giving suggestions. There are no tools at the moment actually which will, hey, like completely uh, go into your source code, like an npm package, or say a library, java based library, on an npm javascript package, which if you add that as a dependency in your source code, it will go and fix your source, entire. And that is because there are so many factors. Implementations differ in terms of how you make a design system, how you make a web application. The API differs. So for basically a tool or a library to understand all of that, that's a very high curve. But having said that, I have an extension actually. There is, because there was a page limit to this. We had a 5 or 7 page, 6 page limit. What I did was I have an extended article that I'm publishing actually this week, and that's in a journal, that different journal, which speaks about how the role of AI will evolve in basically adding web accessibility support. Now there are a lot of new AI tools, which has better intelligence over, how different implementations have, and they at someday in future they will be able to do much better job, but not at the moment. No perfect solution at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, and just wanted to add one thing before I end the presentation, and I forgot to say. So WCAG 2.2, for those who are curious, that was released 6 weeks back. I think 6 to 8 weeks back. So WCAG 2.2 is already out. It has come out with some new success criterias, and WCAG 3.0 is in progress. That's gonna be out in first quarter of 2025. So just for your information. Thank you. Thank you.